Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're calling in from. Really, really glad to have folks coming together today. We have been long awaiting this moment and this event, it feels like, and just really, really glad that all of you could join. We are here for our dynamic accountability dialogue that's focused on feminist and youth-led research and practice during Gender Equality Month in March. But for Accountable Now, our commitment to advancing women's rights and gender equality is not just for March. It's a year-round mission that's deeply ingrained in how we work. I think I already introduced myself, but my brain is feeling a little fuzzy. I'm coming out of board meetings earlier today too. But in case I didn't mention it, I'm the executive director of Accountable Now. We're at a pivotal moment in history for women's rights and feminist movements. We have such a range of statistics around the world about how we're still so far from gender equality and the protection of women and girls and non-binary individuals as well. It's estimated that only 5% of ODA allocated to fight violence against women actually reaches those in need. As of January this year, only 28 women hold the top positions in their countries worldwide. And at our current pace, it would take us an additional 130 years to reach gender equality in these executive roles, presidents, prime ministers of countries. This stark underrepresentation in decision-making in particular, especially in a year with more elections than ever before, it's a huge wake-up call about the work we have ahead. And we know that a lot of that work gets stalled as a result of the underfunding and under-recognition of feminist movements, and especially young feminist movements who are working day in and day out to advance gender equality and rebuild a more just society for us all. The power of young people, particularly feminist youth, to challenge societal norms is absolutely immense. But we know that feminist movements and actors grapple with underrepresentation and insufficient funding. That's both for feminist movements as well as youth movements, but especially when those two things intersect. Despite the obstacles and social injustices faced by young women and girls, they're still offering some of the most innovative and collaborative solutions for transformative social change. And so with this webinar, we're hoping to provide a space for some dynamic, knowledge exchange to amplify the voices of young feminists engaged in research and advocacy for a more just and inclusive future. And, we're hoping that we can be part of an increasing call to action to donors and countries to provide more flexible support to feminist movements around the world, especially those led by young people, whether they be informal or formalized efforts. At the kickoff of our Gender Equality Month, panelist Yasmina, who you'll get to hear from later, who's a prominent feminist activist, stressed the importance of funding and capacity building for feminist-led movements. And I don't want to steal her thunder. I'm sure she'll get into this during her presentation. But she said that funding is absolutely crucial. We received a small grant for research that explores the interplay between the rise of technology for feminist activism and the challenges of online gender-based violence in the Southwest Asia and North African region. And the results in this case have been absolutely amazing. You can learn more about Yasmina's reflection in a podcast episode we did. We'll share that link as well in the chat. Feminist research and practice are pivotal to our dialogue today. The methodologies and approaches that challenge gender equality, inequality, and power imbalances are really crucial to being able to ask the tough questions and make sense of the world around us. We're, hoping that today's discussion will help amplify voices that are underrepresented and, that are advocating for social change through inclusive and participatory research that truly reflects the richness and diversity of experiences and perspectives from real people in their daily lives. This entire the entire premise of the event and the work that the brave and talented young feminists we'll hear from are doing are central to our ethos and mission at Accountable Now, where we champion accountability and transparency within civil society organizations and their trusted stakeholders around the world. And our commitment aligns with the broader feminist movement's goal to foster a just and inclusive world overall. So just very excited to learn from their experiences and how it relates to kind of building that better future for all. So I'm very pleased to have distinguished panelists here with us today. We have Vijita, who's a MEL specialist at World YWCA. We have Yande, who is the power shifting director at Restless Development, and Yasmina, who's the founder of Politics for Her. And all of this will be moderated by the fabulous Jacqueline Hart from the Feminist Humanitarian Network Advocacy Committee. Today's expert panel is a platform for the young feminist leaders to share their research and experiences and innovative approaches. And we hope that you all take away inspiration and new ways of working as a result of listening to their experiences and ideas. We also hope that the event, helps us remember about the ongoing struggles for women and non-binary folks around the world. Confronting the patriarchy is tough and serious business for us all. We'd like to see some solidarity and new connections made as a result of opening this space up, and we'll be delighted to kind of work with you all to take this conversation out of today and into the wider world. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our panelists and for all of you for engaging in the dialogue. Your dedication and your insights will be really invaluable. And, thank you for joining this important conversation and wishing you all very fruitful dialogue. So thank you. I think, Jacqueline, I hand it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Hart with the Feminist Humanitarian Network. And welcome, thanks to Megan, and welcome to our panelists and to all of you for joining this important dialogue. So I am going to ask each of the panelists to present their work that is the focus of today's conversation. And then I will follow up with each of them to ask some more questions to understand sort of how they arrived at doing the work, what are some barriers and facilitators. And then, as Mary said, we will have a whiteboard and have some dialogue with all of you so that we can both hear from you all and your experiences, and also give you an opportunity to engage with the panelists around the work that they'll be sharing today. Suchi, over to you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Megan. That was really inspiring. I am Dr. Suchi Gaur. I work as the Director of Global Engagement and Impact at World YWCA. Today, I'm stepping in for my colleague who couldn't be on the panel. But I'm also bringing in a lot of the work we do at World YWCA here in front of you. So I'm very excited about that. Feminist consultation methodology, what we call as We Rise, We Lead. It is a tool that we are happy to share to the world right now, and we started work on it in 2018. I'm very, very thankful that I've been part of that journey of making the feminist consultation methodology not just a reality with designing it with young women, but now taking it and spreading it far and wide into the work we do. What is the feminist consultation methodology? Well, research has always been very away from community. And when we talk about research being away from community in a very colonial way of looking at things, when the term came, participatory research methodology, everyone got very excited because it was all about people. But still, a lot of the participatory research methodologies that exist out there in the world, they focus on people as part of one process or a step. And at World YWCA, we were like, but we are a community. YWCA movement is community. And why can't we be part of what we want and do it from start to end? And so very inspired, we said, okay, let's bring a set of young women and women together and have them design a whole methodology. what is it to do research, evidence building, in a way that you do it from start to end, and you do it in a feminist manner. You look at language, you look at power, you look at decision making, and you reshape the way traditional methodology is done every step, but in a very feminist manner. So our feminist consultation methodology is made up of 6 steps of what we call as a typical research methodology: plan, design, implement. But then there is a twist to it, which is sense, make, learn, iterate, which also makes it feminist. And every step in this 6-step journey is beautifully described in our methodology, which is an open source tool available for everyone in this world to use, where we say, how do you make each step feminist? How do you change the way the world perceives who is a researcher? Who is the one being researched? How are the questions being framed? How does language play a role in it? How do we talk about taking such theoretical concepts and simplifying them enough so that the community owns the data that they collect? They own the questions that are being asked. They own the language in which the terms that are used to ask their people their information. It's all based on safe space approach, making a space for research where data can be truly representative of the realities. And so it took us 4 years to come to a point where we said, now it's ready to be out in the world, because we worked through COVID. We worked through these different phases. We included technology, and young women finally said, this is the methodology we feel truly represents what it means to make any process more feminist. So it is a methodology that just not focuses on research, but can be adopted everywhere. And I'll answer more of that later in the following piece. I'm very proud that I've been able to have conversations with women, young women, youth from so many different countries in the world who have now used the methodology over the past 2 years. And World YWCA is keen to share it, to train people out there to use the methodology and do magic with it by stepping out from being the expert and letting people who are in the community be the experts on their rights. And so it shifts the power within the development sector. So yeah, I'll deep dive more about it, but it's a big methodology. It's available on our website. We can share a link. It's available for access. And we're very proud that Accountable Now has also shared it as one of the case studies on a locally led evidence-based generation tool. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Suchi. I think, picking up on themes, right? Research is often extractive and certainly not feminist. It sounds like your methodology is really tackling that head on. And that the activity of knowledge creation and use is in and of itself a power shifting intervention and mechanism. So thank you for that. And I believe, Yande, you'll be next, and that you have a presentation that needs to be pulled up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I feel like she already hit the nail on the head, and our methodologies are quite similar. But hi, everybody. My name is Yande. I'm from Restless Development. I'm the Power Shifting Director, and I'm so happy and honored to be in this space and to be able to speak to you about Restless Development's youth-led research model. Youth-led research at Restless Development is an approach that basically works to position young people as the partners and the leaders, and who are also inherently the beneficiaries of that research. Some of the principles underlying this model are highly adaptable to different organizations, but they're really about giving young people the space to really speak into their own narratives, to really shape what their realities look like. As the previous speaker already alluded to, research is a very highly academic area, and the perception is that someone with so many degrees in the global north is usually the one that will come to the global south and actually do the research from the design all the way to the sharing of the findings. But at Restless Development, we decide that young people are in charge of their own narratives. And even in power shifting, we believe this approach hits that on the head in the sense that he who has the knowledge has the power, right? He who tells the story has the power, or she in a feminist world. And it's really about shaping the perspectives of young people for them to change and dismantle that colonial perception and that systematic perception that young people can't be academics. So at Restless Development, from the design stage all the way up to the sharing and dissemination of those findings, we designed a youth-led approach that looks at how can we support young people in their communities to lead on issues that matter to them, first of all, in a way that's feminist and a way that's empowering in the process. Designing the research methodology, to conducting the interviews, to collecting the data, to disseminating that, and even to advocating for changes in policy and resourcing. So it's really, really about giving young people the space, the power, the knowledge, the resources. Someone has already mentioned funding, to really, really advocate and look into the issues and own the knowledge in the research space that speaks to their issues. So yeah, I'll speak a bit more about some of the research that we've done on our state of the youth and share some of the findings. But for now, I'll just leave it there and we can unpack it in the Q&A.
Oh, sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. Actually, Yande, would it be okay to ask you to share some of that detail now? Because I think it will help in terms of later on in the conversation.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So as I mentioned, youth-led feminist research is a big part of our power shifting approach. We believe that we want to dismantle the notion of who owns the knowledge. And in this, we have developed what we call our State of the Youth Civil Society research, which is our annual flagship research that aims to look and take a snapshot into the current realities of youth civil society. So in 2023, we decided to focus on feminist movements and young feminist movements that are holding the line and advocating for change in a very difficult and shrinking civic political space. We're currently witnessing an increasing attack on the rights of women and girls. There's a huge global rollback, which feels coordinated and well-funding and gaining so much momentum. So we wanted to find out, how are young feminists holding the line across the globe? What are some of the strategies that they're using? What are some of the methods that they're using to really, really hold the line and advocate for those issues? So we conducted this research and we took a mixed method approach to obtain the data, which included desk-based research, in-depth interviews with young feminists, focus group discussions, and a global survey that went out to 1,000 different, that had 1,000 different respondents. And it was very interesting in using this youth-led approach. We had young people in communities actually conducting the research, which really, really was beneficial to the results, because if a young person is speaking to a young person about their realities, we found that it was a safe space for them to speak about their lived truth. We also did take a very inclusive approach, especially with language minorities. All interviews were conducted in the language that interviewees felt most comfortable in, including Hindi, Portuguese, French, Arabic. And also the survey was translated into different languages. And also really utilizing local support, using youth-led researchers to really collect that data, as I already mentioned. And the findings were quite interesting, which I think some of the previous speakers have already alluded to, is the current reality of young feminists. Young feminists are underfunded. There's an increasing, shrinking amount of money that is reaching youth feminist movements. And we see that this is really impacting the work that they do. Young feminist movements are increasingly taking up space online, which has a benefit in the sense that it's easy to communicate and strategize and really find your community in real time, but has also opened up threats in terms of security and safety for young women, as well as the increasing restrictive space on speaking on civic rights online. And so there are a couple of conclusions. I hope we can skip to them on what our research found. But I think the most important for this space is to note that we need to really reassess what allyship looks like for youth feminist movements. We need to rebuild trust with young feminists holding the line. We also need to change the narrative in research. Who tells the story? Who gets to tell the perspectives of young feminists? I argue that it should be young feminists themselves. We also need to really include unrestricted funding that takes into account the challenges and threats to mental health and well-being of young feminists across the globe. And again, fund young feminists, because I'll say it again, in a way that Yasmina has already highlighted. We need to fund young feminist movements in a way that is able to resource them to do this amazing work that they're doing on the front lines at an increasing personal and financial cost. Yeah, I'll end there.
Thanks so much, Yande. And just to say, I know when you first started, you said that Suchi had, already hit the main points, but I think that for each of you and for all of us who are engaging in feminist practice and knowledge building and power shifting and sharing, that it's in the particulars of how you applied a feminist methodology to your works. So your, specific sharing of this project around, you're applying a feminist methodology to this like really critical issue problem of the backlash against gender justice and rights in the world. So thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to also want to pick up this issue of resourcing as also it relates to the ability to apply a feminist methodology. So even the specific that you shared about ensuring that all of the research was conducted in the language that the people were most comfortable with, right? Not English, surely. That takes, we've all grappled with that. Like, where's the funding for that? Like, literally the time and the money to do that properly, and to invest in that. So anyway, congratulations on that. Megan, I see that you asked a question in the chat. Can we hold that for now is that okay? Okay, great. So thank you. And now I welcome Yasmina to share about their methodology. And Yasmina, I'm not sure if you have any kind of presentation to share, but just jump in and go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't have a presentation. I'll just be speaking. First of all, I want to say that I'm so happy to be here with amazing fellow feminists like Dr. Suchi and Yande, both amazing organizations I've collaborated and worked with. So very good choice. So we did the research funded by Restless and supported by Restless on exploring the interplay between the rise of technology for feminist activism, but also the challenges that comes with it, online gender-based violence, specifically in the Swana region. So why did we choose that region? Because it's personal, of course, coming from the region, but also seeing all of the political and social transformation, especially that we've witnessed since what is referred to as the Arab Springs, that we call the Revolution of Dignity or the uprising of 2010-2011. This is a critical moment in history where we saw how digital technologies were used for real life change. So these platforms have shown us how they can shape how activism is conducted, and they offered new avenues for mobilization, and they also introduced very new challenges. And that's when we chose this topic, because we were talking about our lived experiences of harassment online, of online gender-based violence, of tech-facilitated violence, but especially this region because we see how there's also a huge digital divide, but also surveillance from authoritarian governments, a lot of political turmoil and instability. And especially now with the genocide in Palestine, it was absolutely a key moment to see that digital apartheid and digital genocide also takes place online, not only in real life, and that these challenges affect disproportionately young women and girls, but also LGBTQIA plus community and gender minorities. So our reports highlight the urgent need for robust support systems and legal reforms, but especially we're holding tech companies accountable because this is on them. They're the ones that allowed this to happen in the safe space. And it's sickening to see also how they want to ban TikTok in the US. And it's not for safety measures, it's because they fear young people. Young people have been outspoken, they've been able to connect with one another about crucial issues ongoing, whether it is the genocide in Palestine or the silent one in Congo, Sudan. And they saw the real life implications that it has with the boycotts, with how it's literally making a big corporation go bankrupt. So yeah, so we're holding tech companies accountable because the main challenges we've identified were online harassment, censorship, with content removal, shadow banning, and also what are the specific adversities when it comes to youth, women, LGBT communities. So whether it is homophobia, gender slurs, racist slur, which I also been through. And I spoke about this on the podcast. So if you want to listen to the podcast, you should go for it. And we provided recommendations that enhance digital security, but also promote gender equality, because this is what's missing. The tech industry is growing at such a rapid pace that who's actually holding them accountable? Where is the intersectional youth feminist approach? Who's advocating for these policy reforms to protect digital activists online and offline? And how did we censor our research? So of course, everybody that took part of the research is a young person from the region. So lived experiences, again, I think it's really important, but also everyone who was involved in the process is from the region. So we adopted nothing about us without us kind of approach and stance, because that ensures that it's grounded in our lived experiences and that we understand we are experts in our own way. We don't need to have a PhD to understand that. And that goes back to what was mentioned before about how academia, you do not need to have multiple degrees. You do not need to be from the global north, or it's time to decolonize academia as well. And we also made sure that we compensated everyone. I'm so tired of hearing excuses from organizations saying, oh, we're reaching out for a survey, but we don't compensate. We had the 2,500 grant and we compensated everyone. So there's no excuses. So that's on it, like it's important that we compensate young people, our peers, for their experience and for their time, because they are experts in their own lived experiences. So this is really aligning with the principles of feminist research, equity and justice, and it mitigates power imbalances between researchers and participants, because it's a co-creation process. Whether you're the researcher or the participant, we're not here to just take your information and put it out there. We're here to actually amplify your voices and make sure that you have a safe space where you can express yourself. Of course, we made sure that either if they wanted to be anonymous, to get the consent, and same thing. So we did surveys, we did focus groups, we did interviews, and we also ensured that it would be either in French, English, Arabic, whatever language they're comfortable, because again, we're from the region. So we master all of these languages. And yes, I think that sometimes the challenge is when you don't have a lot of funding, but if you choose people from the region that are also have lived experiences, then you don't need extra funding for that, because we're experts again, and we are very versatile. We speak multiple languages. We're from the region. So I think that that's also emphasizing on the with us, by us, for us. This was specifically for digital activists from the region to make sure that also the methodology is inherently feminist and decolonial, focusing on collaboration and empowerment and reflexivity, and ensure that the research process in itself is transformative. We also wanted to make sure that there was like a fair regional representation, because the Swana region is big, right? So we did different case studies highlighting specific countries like Palestine, like Iran, Sudan, Egypt, to make sure that, you know, we humanize this report, that it's about human beings. Sometimes we get lost. You know, reports are just reports where findings, very focused on the findings. So we really wanted to humanize that. But beyond that, you know, like, I think that when it comes to funding, yes, funding, financial compensation is important, but the funding has to come with mentorship. The funding has to come with guidance. It's not just like throwing money at us and be like, okay, go do your research. Like, it's great to trust us. I love that. But you have to align with feminist principles of, you know, care and compassion and support and empowerment and being here through every step of the way with us. Because we usually do this research on our own for free because we don't have the core and flexible funding. But that's another important point. When we talk about funding, it has to be core, flexible, sustainable, can't be just a one-time thing. It has to be continuous so that we can support our work within the space. You know, like, we were very grateful. Restless offered us also the EcoSoc accreditation. So, you know, one of our team members was in New York. She was able to go to CSW to share these findings, to distribute a one-pager about our research, to attend events where those tech companies were there and hold them accountable, be like, this is what we've found about you, this is what you can do about it. So I think that, you know, like, beyond the research, there's also like advocacy after that. It has to be like a sustainable approach to it, so that we really see the meaningful and long-lasting change. And the report is up on the website. We have not like advertised it yet, but it will be advertised soon. But I highly recommend to go check it out. As I said, it's made by young people, for young people. It's about us, for us, in the region, something really close to my heart as a digital activist who has been through smear campaigns, online harassment. I had to leave Twitter X because of that, and because it didn't fit with my feminist values, especially since Elon Musk took over. I'm like, it doesn't make sense for me to be in a platform led by a billionaire that doesn't make the line between hate speech and free speech. I'm out. I think it's also important to go where you're celebrated and take precautions to protect yourself. And those are all things that we highlight in the report. So go check it out.
Thank you so much, Yasmina. And I think, you know, your work and presentation today also highlights another important facet of the method of any kind of feminist research practice or feminist knowledge building and use practice, right? Because it's about creating knowledge in a particular way so that you get a different kind of knowledge. And you're also highlighting with your example of, you know, who gets sent to CSW to use that knowledge and put it into action for advocacy to hold tech companies and others accountable. So, you know, I think as Suchi started, you know, the presentation with, you know, steps 1 through 6, I think it was, but from start to finish. And, you know, finish is also like, what are you going to do with the knowledge and who gets to use it? And as Yande said, like, who gets to speak, right? And that's another really critical piece of, you know, feminist research and practice that you all have touched on, which is, it's not just the creation or the how of the creation of the knowledge, but also the how and who gets to use the knowledge and who gets to decide what it's for. So, so thank you for that. I am going to ask each of you a follow-up question. And you can answer it in any way you want. And then to our audience and allies who are part of this call, I also want to say that next we'll be opening up the whiteboard and hearing from you all to share your experiences and comments and questions for the panelists. So my question is, can you share some of the barriers and facilitators to this work? So that could be inside your own organization. I mean, you're all either you have founded your own organization, you work within a context of a feminist organization, but still, were there barriers and facilitators that made that work in your organization possible or more difficult and that you had to overcome? And or what are the barriers and facilitators to actually getting this done in the world? Like, you know, sharing with allies, with the, you know, the institutions and actors who you are trying to shift with your work. So when you think about this methodology, what do you think are some key barriers and or facilitators? And you can answer it in any way you want. It could be with your donors, it could be with allies, civil society it could be with state government, the movements that you collaborate with. So I'm going to ask Suchi, why don't you go ahead? We haven't heard from you since the beginning. If you want to
Yeah.
take that up, thank
Yes,
you.
definitely. I mean, we heard from the other people, Yasmina and Yande, talking about some of the pieces like funding, you know, and I don't want to deep dive that. It's a big space and it has been a challenge. What I do want to say is some of the barriers are actually sitting in us, in our organizations, because we are so used to doing things the way we have been taught and the way we have learned it and the way that works according to us, that we forget that it's not about us. This whole thing is not about us, not about donors, not about what we are, our goals and mission and vision is as an organization. It's actually outside. So some of the barriers we see right now, even because this is a tool which is open to everyone. It's a tool when we talk about it, people are like, this is very exciting, but then it takes away my expert hat away from me. And us to see that as a challenge and say, hey, it's time we play a different role in the development sector, because that's not what the role of the organizations should be. Our role should be facilitator. Our role should be a bridge builder. Our role should be a platform to make things happen rather than do things on our own. And the role of, and very often I hear and see organizations saying, by this tool, we are empowering people. Who are we to empower people? You know, by these tools, what we say when we speak of feminist consultation methodologies, by this tool, people will empower themselves. And that's the beauty. Empowerment, you know, like power giving and sharing, we are breaking it. So very often the barriers are the languages that we've heard, the systems and methods we have followed, and how we become strict to it. And we like that traditional way of doing things. And questioning it is going to shake up a lot of things in an organization. It even might make my job redundant, but why not? You know, and I think if we think things are working, that's our perception of it. When we look at community, I mean, when we started this work, one of the basic questions we started asking was, how many of people, any room we entered with FCM, we said, how many of you have been part of researches where you have filled a questionnaire or interviewed and you don't know why it was done, or you don't know what happened with it, or you don't know the analysis of it? And everyone, every time, every single person raises hand. And for us, that's a piece that the barrier is in the system very much. The other barrier, obviously, is all that's happening right now, the political unrest. Like there's a lot that's stopping us from innovation in these spaces. And I see it both as a barrier and a space for innovation, like how we can twist it. So I also call it a facilitator, because somehow it's making us to look at things differently. It's pushing us to that piece. And in our case, with the feminist consultation methodology, young women and our movement was truly an enabler into this piece, because while we are a 170-year-old movement, and we have colonial roots as a movement, we are still one of the oldest community-driven grassroots movement. We said, oh my God, we are doing things differently. Let's change it. And let's start by us. And so the methodology is a tool that came out of a ask that the movement saw within. And then we realized, hey, but so many people can benefit out of it, because if it's helping us shape ourselves better, do things differently, redo, how do we write proposals? How do we do evaluations? How we do campaigns and advocacy, content building? How do we do something as basic as, hey, we are designing a tool. Can we make it more feminist? The process, not just the content feminist. Can we, instead of hiring 3 experts on subject matter experts, can we say we will bring in facilitators who will work with the community to design the tool? To, and that shift has just made things so different within the organization for us. So people became, young people, women in the movement, who they became the enablers of it. They became the facilitators of it. And I would say there are funders out there who are ready to fund this. We just need to, there's a lot of negotiations needed. We're so used to doing things the typical way, we sometimes struggle with opening up spaces and saying, hey, the way you want me to do things, saying that to a donor, we're not going to do it. I'm sorry. We are going to say no to your funding. Why that doesn't happen is because there's another organization, a civil society organization, that says, okay, we'll do it, whatever you want. If all civil society sector says, we will not do what you're asking out, donors will have to change their ways of doing things, right? So I still sit in meetings with people and donors who are like, but asking, we should have all these 15 answers before we go to the community. And I'm like, no, why should we? That's not our job. You're asking us to be stepping in shoes of the community. That's wrong. And for me, I mean, I have a PhD. This was one of the most liberating exercises. I have let go of so many practices and unlearned so many things that traditionally I have learned. And that's because people are driving this piece. So for me, again, the barriers are within us, and facilitators are out there in the community. So if we truly let go of the traditional roles that we see ourselves playing as organizations, or even trying to always replicate what other organizations are doing, we will really embrace the reality. And we say, why did, for example, will YWCA no to a particular donor? Is it ethical for us as other organization to say, yes, we'll do things as you want, because it will get us the money? So yes, funding size is less, competition is high, and very often the barriers are within organizations to stop us from truly being feminist in the ways we talk about funding, talk about methodologies, talk about people.
Thank you so much, Suchi. Just to pick up on a few of your comments, the issue that you first identified, which is the problem is within us, right? As individuals and institutions, especially, I would say, INGOs of any kind. And I understand the worldwide YWCA is also a movement, but it is also an INGO, right? And as are many, many INGOs, filled with people who might be well-meaning, right? And have feminist practice and perspective. But I think that when it comes down to it, and I've seen this in my work time and time again, it means that you have to give up your own power as individuals and as institutions, right? And I like that you said, maybe my job is redundant. And I think that's true. It's like asking, in this ecosystem, what, as you said, what is the proper role for each kind of knowledge, expertise, positionality, and so I think that's really critical piece. So thank you for calling attention to that. Internal piece is often being one of the most critical barriers. And on this issue of negotiating with donors and being willing to forego and having the luxury to forego funding, right? I think, I often think, why aren't we all collectivizing, right? Why could we all collectivize and say, and just kind of like have a strike, Like, no, actually, we're not participating. Now that's a luxury that not everyone, not every organization or individual person has, but so thank you for those points. Yande, can I turn to you and ask you to address these questions? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I mean, mine are super similar to Dr. Suchi. I think one of the biggest barriers is the patriarchy and the system. I think that we're so comfortable in the status quo of academia that we're not willing to break down those barriers and look at research differently, or look at research from a feminist lens, or adopt feminist principles holistically, not just in where we're going, but in the process as well. And there's also an element of really being self-aware as organizations, as INGOs, as partners, as allies, and doing the work to dismantle our biases that we come into this space with. I mean, we've spent years and years, myself included, learning that in order for you to succeed, you need to get these degrees, and then you need to have a couple of years before you have doctor in front of your name. And like, one thing that I've learned from our research is that there's not a lot of trust of youth-led, feminist-led initiatives. So how do we as organizations begin to dismantle those biases that we come with from our different cultures and perspectives, and really decolonize the academia space so that a youth researcher can be seen as an academic? Or just picking the example that Yasmina gave of the research that she did on the tech giants and the shrinking space. That's lived experience. That's a perspective that you can't get from seeing it from the other side. So I think one of the biggest barriers that we have is not really embracing that change, and not doing the work to dismantle those biases, and not doing the work to be self-aware, even feminist organizations, to say, look, if we're really going to be feminist, even our research methodologies need to reflect those values. Even the way in which we approach research needs to reflect that. A second one, again, is we've already mentioned, is funding. I really loved Yasmina's point on stressing that, look, we need to start paying youth researchers. We need to stop saying we don't have a budget for it. If you're going to utilize the expertise of young people and their lived experiences, you need to fairly compensate them. And sometimes I hear in some rooms, they're like, oh, we don't have a budget for that. We don't have a budget for translation. We don't have a budget for, that needs to stop. And we need to really value the expertise of youth researchers, feminist researchers in the communities that we work with. And then facilitators, I just want to touch on this one quickly, is we really need to have a safe space for learning. I think that's something I've learned at Restless Development. We need to be okay with making mistakes and learning from them. I think that's what's missing in facilitating some of these processes. Someone already mentioned that organizations love to learn from other organizations and replicate. If one organization is not walking the talk, then everyone else won't do it. So how are we creating a space to say, look, we tested out this methodology, we tested out this tool with women in this community, and these are the results, and it's more sustainable this way. So I think we need to be a bit more radical in facilitating the process and stepping out of our comfort zones to facilitate those safe spaces for learning to build into our research methodologies.
Thank you so much, Yande. Yeah, I want to pick up especially on this issue you're highlighting that Yasmina mentioned in terms of paying young feminist researchers and community members, and really, right, like paying is also in our world, and for survival, saying, yes, like you hold expertise, you're indispensable to this work. And as you said, even like once you get the grant from a donor and you're sitting inside your feminist organization, we've all heard that. We've all heard people say, well, we don't have the budget to translate into all those languages. We don't have the budget to pay community members, young feminists to do the research. And it's, it's kind of like, well, yes, we're going to take a road trip and we have a car. We need the car to take the trip, but we don't have any tires. It's like, no, actually, then you can't do it. Then no, you can't do it. And I think you know, that's part of what I heard you saying when you said safe space for learning with other organizations. It's saying like, can we have some agreement about like absolutely what is not possible? Like it is, we can't drive the car without wheels. We cannot do feminist research and practice if we are not compensating people for their expertise and their time, right? That's, so thanks very much for that. You know, and an age-old feminist issue, of course, is, you know, paying women for their labor and their expertise. So if I could turn now to Yasmina to talk a bit about barriers and facilitators. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I resonate deeply with what has been shared. I strongly believe that funding is a huge challenge, but if you can't do feminist research all the way through, then don't do it. Just don't do it, you know, like just don't. Otherwise, it's just going against your ethos, it's going against your principles, your values. And I think that you can find a way to make it happen if you really have the will. Since, you know, like we've conducted our research online and on digital technologies, I want to also focus a little bit on the limitations when it comes to that. We have to be mindful that when we conduct this kind of research, that young people are deeply affected by a huge digital divide. There's 360 million young people that are not meaningfully digitally connected. So, you know, like when we do this research, we also have to be mindful that the ones that we are able to reach out to are kind of part of the privileged ones, the elite. So we have to remember that not everybody has access to digital technologies. The other point to mention that we have also mentioned within our study limitations is the accuracy of the surveys that we were doing, the answers that we were getting, especially if it's anonymous. We don't really necessarily have a way to confirm that it's real information, but also we know that there are fears, and these fears are legitimate. But when also we advertise that we're providing a stipend, sometimes people can be interested not in the best possible way. So we had some issues with that too, that they're more motivated by the financial compensation than the actually essence of the research. Because we had someone who joined one of the focus groups and like, oh, I never had online violence, or I'm like, okay, so why are you here, you know? But that goes back to remembering that this research is not representative of all young people in the Swana region, because there's also this fear of the surveillance and their inability to express themselves freely. And so we also had to be mindful of those things when connecting online. We provided different avenues. Do you prefer to talk on Signal, on WhatsApp, on Zoom? And, you know, like we provided different means of communications as to adapt to the preference of the participants in the research. But other than that, you know, like as I mentioned, it's great. We did the research, right? It was months of hard work, of coordination. It's very heavy on the mental health. It's not an easy topic. It's triggering, especially if you've faced online violence. It's upsetting. And it's something that you read and you read the experiences. So I think that also within mental health, it's really crucial that we approach that with care, with love, with compassion. So, you know, within Politics for Her, we always hear for one another. We always allow each other to take breaks if it's needed. But most importantly, you know, like we help and guide each other. We do capacity building within us, because if we're not going to find it elsewhere, then we have to figure it out. So we're going to provide capacity building. If someone has more experience and more skills in an aspect, then they will share that knowledge with us. And because again, it's a co-creation, co-leadership kind of model, which is really important. But other than that, I think that's beyond the research. We didn't get funding for CSW. You know, the team member that was able to attend is because she lives in New York. All the team members that worked so hard for months on this research were not able to come and represent themselves and talk for themselves. And I find that it's a pity, you know. Right now, the EcoSoc forum is coming up, and I see my LinkedIn timeline flooded with young people not being able to participate to these events. So beyond the research, how can we advocate for ourselves if we're still excluded from decision-making processes about us, without us, specifically on topics regarding us? You know, like everyone at CSW just spoke about young women, but were all the young women in all their diversity able to represent themselves, to talk for themselves, to highlight the research findings that we had? No, we had a team member that was privileged enough to be in New York. We were able to get the ECOSOC status so that she could attend events and distribute the research. But the young women from this region, it's impossible almost. You don't have the visas, you don't have the funding, there are systemic barriers. And it's just like tiring and draining to always have to deal with the same issues, to see that the high-level events exclude the voices that are the most impacted by crisis, by online violence. And if we really want to change, dismantle the patriarchy, the system, because even the funding landscape is extremely neo-colonial and patriarchal. So if we really want to change that, then we also, us as feminists, have to start questioning the system. We have to start thinking, should we be in these spaces, or should we create our own spaces where we would be celebrated and where we wouldn't face so many barriers? And I will leave it there so that we can reflect on that.
Thank you so much, Yasmina. I just want to sort of pull out 2 points. One is the systemic inequalities and exclusions that are like geopolitical, right? So even just the issue of visas, right? I mean, you know, I remember Women Deliver, because it was in Rwanda. That was, you know, politically, it meant that people could get visas who wouldn't have otherwise gotten visas to a lot of other places, certainly not to the US. And then also want to pull out this issue of mental health that you touched on in your remarks now, and then also previously, which is to say that, you know, feminist practice, feminist knowledge building, feminist advocacy also does require a great deal of care, you know, because it is lived experience, because it is as it should be, both created and used by those people who are closest to the question at hand. And that is something to grapple with in terms of what is possible, how do we resource it appropriately to take care of people. So thank you to the panelists. I see that we have around 20 minutes left. So I really want to open it up for dialogue. And I think maybe what we can do is pull up a whiteboard. And I'm not sure for all of our participants, if you all can access that directly for yourselves, or if you'd like, you can put things that you want into the chat, and the Accountable Now team will facilitate putting them on Post-its on the whiteboard. And it could be either a question or comment for the panelists, or a particular barrier or facilitator in your own experience of trying to really get feminist research and practice done. So let me open it up. If I can ask the Accountable Now team for help with making sure that we, that if you can raise your hand and speak. And also, while I'm calling on people to speak, all of you, if you can all just contribute to the whiteboard. And then I can also comment on that. We can discuss those inputs.
My name is Mumbi Namwawa, and I'm from Zambia. I did share a brief introduction in the comment section, so you can just look out for my name if you want to get more details. But yeah, contributing to the conversation. First, I want to say I'm really thankful for the team that has come together and put this up. I think it's important that we should be having, you know, open conversations about, you know, young people, feminist research especially. And I said this as a person coming from an African country, where it's even more difficult to actually have access to funding itself, but as well as to just get the necessary attention to be supported when carrying out such an initiative. I am a feminist myself. I've worked with political movements for some time now. And one of the hardest things that I've had to encounter in the process of this work is getting to have, data put together that is feminist driven, even when you're doing work around, women, because I do a lot of politics. Of course, my focus will be a lot on political participation, governance, and women. It's very difficult, and much of the data that we've had to use has had to be dependent on what, others are bringing to us. And I think this is a point that Yasmina talked about, where we get a case where it's our problem, but we are having more people from, the global north being the one providing this information. And rarely will you get, engaged directly in these processes. So what I'm basically trying to comment is that we do definitely have to open up more ground, for feminist-led research by the feminists themselves, by the young women themselves, and broaden the ground, especially from the African region. I have been trying to carry out a research right now, and I don't know how many places I've written to for them to just see the concept. We have elections coming up after next year, and that's in 2026. And currently, we're still having very, 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 very bad representation in leadership on the Zambian end. And interestingly, while the internet space has grown for participation of women, young people, and all that, shockingly, we're still not getting enough women to get into these spaces. So, which raises the question to what extent can these online platforms, can the technology advancements contribute towards women getting into these positions, whether they're going to be appointed or they will be running for candidacy. You can tell that there's definitely a gap in data from what we feel should be happening and what is actually happening on the ground. But for you to just get a hold of that is not the easiest thing. And it begins to clash, because on one end, you were talking about gender inclusion, feminist principles, feminist, thought process when it comes to leadership. But at the same time, there's minimal support to support mechanisms or create mechanisms that make those dreams possible. So I just thought I should share that from a Zambian perspective, and just give thanks to the panelists for the great contribution that they've offered. And I've been looking forward to checking out some of their work that they've shared, that they've said they've shared, so that we just get to look at them and learn as well and see how they can be applied in our context here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think your hand is still raised. Imane?
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you all for this very informative experience, and also share my own experience. Currently, I'm working with a think tank in creating an online course about women's rights. It's an introduction for people who have no idea about what is going on with women's rights and feminist movement and so on, globally, and specifically in the Swana region. I'm in the content creating phase. It was really a struggle due to the lack of information and resources, especially in Swana region. I think Yasmina can confirm this. For example, on the female workforce in the informal sector, yes, it is a struggle. I can imagine the informal sector is a challenging matter, and not just in the region. And the lack of data is very dominant. But I am sure that youth are ready to put at hand their skills and take on such projects. So it's really sad that specifically in the region, they don't trust the youth. This is also a struggle. So yeah, I wish this changed, and maybe this is a start for it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Imani. Why don't I call on one other person? Is there, Zara, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. So hello, my name is Zara. I'm currently serve as a head of research and advocacy throughout Southeast Asia. So we are currently conducting research on the social protections of young women rights defender in Southeast Asia. And we're gonna use the collection methods by interviewing some of the young women human rights defender. But I have a question like how can this interview or describe the actual conditions of the populations and fully representative enough of the young woman human rights defender itself, as you know that women human rights defender working in many issues, not only about gender-based, but also in the context of environment, peace and security. So yeah, that's my question. And is it by categorizing the issues that being advocated for, or is there an appropriate methodology to complete this research so the result can representing the actual conditions of the social protection of young women human rights defender in Southeast Asia? Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. So in the interest of time, I want to turn it back to our panelists. I'm sorry for the people who might have their hands raised that we've run out of time, but maybe if you can put any comments, any further comments in the chat and in the whiteboard so that the Accountable Now team can gather them. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. If you want to just jump in, address Zara's question, and or pick up on any of the other comments about the lack of data, quality of data, what that means for the possibility for advocacy. And so over to you, if you want to just jump in, because I can't see, I know Yasmina had to leave. So if you want to just jump in.
I can add. I mean, that's the reality. Data is present, but data is not done collected in a feminist way. It's not authentic. It doesn't speak to people's reality. Data is collected. It's not shared back with the community. They don't know. Issues are being spoken as if it's their realities. They don't know, which is where one of the things that we feel is critical is taking data, making data feminist, making feminist data. If we all start doing this, every process of evidence building in a feminist manner, we will have more data available, which is truly representative of the realities. And if we empower communities to do that, we will have more community people who will question the data that exists and say, this is not representative of my reality. And we have seen that in one of our studies where young girls in Rohingya community, they did research on their reproductive rights. They were the ones who designed the methodology. They interviewed, they did everything. At the end, they were like, oh my God, this is our reality. And what is the service available to us? And we need to do something about it. So even when this grant finished, they came back to us and said, oh, we just wanted to let you know we are going to start advocating based on the data we have collected, which is our reality. It speaks to us. So it's about the process as much as I would say, or looking at why don't we have that data? I think it starts with building that data up. And I call on a lot of global entities who are doing research to really shed their ways in question. My husband often asks me if feminist ways is every process can every process be made feminist, and I say yes. And he says, if that's the case, will it make it better? And I say yes. And he says, then why are not people doing it? And I say, because people are so used to not innovating and doing things the typical way, which according to them saves time, saves money. That's the goal. The goal is not true representation. So if we truly start questioning and stopping ourselves from doing the way that we've done evidence building without people, and we don't, I would say, make processes in a way that people themselves hold the data and hold authorities accountable for speaking for them, we will not go that way. So I know it sounds a little spiritual, but we have seen it in action in very small parts and pieces. And if we start populating those small parts and pieces, we will have something more elaborate to talk to. Hopefully, within this year, World YWCA will be able to share more about this with you with evidence that we are collecting from the people who are using this methodology and saying, we are now advocating for this. We have a research that's going on with the Politics for Her Asia arm right now on SRHR in youth in India that's using the feminist consultation methodology. We have another research in India that's going on with deaf community young people who are exploring using the feminist consultation methodology to do everything from scratch and say, this is about our body rights. So the inclusive piece, if we start building that up in every research process, we will start getting there. But also the other part is questioning the data that gets out and saying, how is this collected? Tell us about the process. And if it was not done in a feminist way, saying we say no to this data.
Thank you, Suchi. And Yande, I can't see you on my screen. Hi, over to you.
Great, yeah. So my comment is just with regards to something I saw on the board that I felt like would be my last comment. Had to do with it being exhausting, always being the one pushing, and the burnout and mental health crises. I just want to say that fighting the patriarchy and pushing a feminist agenda is going to be taxing work, and it's very important that we're taking care of ourselves and as a community embodying collective care, because the system is designed to burn us out, to make us give up, to stop pushing it because it's the status quo. So just to say, yes, it can be demoralizing, it can be draining, but just ensure that when you're doing this work, I heard a speaker, a participant from Zambia as well, talking about the elections coming up. Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're doing your advocacy in a safe way and in a way that protects your well-being. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Yande. I want to hand it back over to Megan and have a big round of applause for our panelists for sharing their amazing work and insightful and important comments, and to all of you who've put some really great things up on that whiteboard, and for our 3 people who asked terrific questions and made comments. So thank you. For me, this has been terrific, and I'll be thinking a lot about this and hope to continue the conversation. Over to you, Megan.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline, and huge thank you to Suchi and Yande. And Yasmina is gone, but I think we have maybe one of Yasmina's colleagues still with us. So please, thank you to you also, Kimberly. It's wow, what a fabulous set of reflections and ideas. I feel like I learned a lot, really crystallized some new issues for me. I'm going to do a little bit of a sloppy job trying to pull out some of the things that really stood out to me, but by no means should my words be the definitive words for this group. I think what Yande and Suchi, for instance, had to share just now was the really incredible reflections. Personally, the issue around burnout and mental health in the sector is one that has long plagued me as somebody who personally has lived through it as well and who struggles with those issues, and seeing that it affects women especially, and young women, and you know, wanting to bring more recognition and attention to that issue, and just more solidarity and safety in our community for when we're going through that. We're working on the hardest problems in the world and some of the hardest places with the least amount of resources. So, you know, it's hard work that we're doing, and it gets stressful. So Yande, just thank you again for emphasizing the need for self-care and kind of setting boundaries and limits, because we are definitely in a marathon and not a sprint. Just a couple of kind of key ideas that really stood out to me, you know, this idea of the power economy, and especially the power economy as it applies to research and knowledge, you know, like what is fact, what is right, who gets to decide, whose voices count and matter. You know, that's kind of at the root of some of our discussion today. That's there for me, is about the power in establishing fact. We all know the challenges with, you know, how even in the US, how history is taught in the US is not actually what has happened here in this country, but it definitely has a certain bias and a certain point of view. And we're fighting actively against those kind of biases and points of view to uncover what's actually happening. And so this is about breaking down that kind of piece of the power economy in what is knowledge and what is fact. I think I appreciated reference to some of the more extractive approaches used often in research in our sector and evaluation. I come up through this world largely as an evaluator, at least in my early days. And we know that those, exact tools reinforce patriarchy and white supremacy, both in particularly in how we understand fact to be established. Again, kind of coming back to that. And I really appreciated what Dr. Suchi had to share around unlearning and how crucial that is to our work. And we've all been raised in a particular way. I mean, this fabulous group here has grown up all around the world, but I'm sure we were all taught really seemingly factual and important things that, as we've come to this work and come to question some of even the base tenets of, how the world is organized, that we have started to realize the things that we were taught are not true. And in fact, there's a whole other story behind them. I also really appreciated the reflection around internal transformation inside organizations. And, Dr. Suchi, I'll refer to you again, because I really liked what you had to say about working ourselves out of a job. And, the reality, it's complicated. We all also need to, I'm assuming we all, don't just have bags of money sitting around somewhere. So we also need to work. And so the reality of, what we're talking about here and giving up power and shifting resources, is also very complicated and intersects with people, not only their identity, but their livelihoods and safety, and just how complicated that is, and how complicated it is to have realistic conversations when you feel those things are being threatened, even if spiritually or, your vision aligns, that in practice and in that day-to-day, it really makes a difference. And I appreciated, Yande, your points around mistakes and how really crucial it is to make mistakes. We are going to, if this was easy to do, if there were clear answers, we would be there already. The brain power just in this room alone is fantastic. If there was an answer already available, we would have it here. And we don't, because there is not a clear answer. There are not clear solutions and clear pathways. And we're rubbing up again against big centers of power. And so that need to have grace and humility with our work, and not thinking we have the answer, but that we're constantly working towards it. So I just really appreciated that point. And then finally, and just this is something that's been on my brain quite a lot lately, is the opportunity for wider collective action and collective bargaining among movements and civil society organizations. It's something we're thinking a lot about. This is a really tough year for civil society organizations. Money is tighter than ever. Many organizations are folding, are, facing massive layoffs. And, a lot of that has to do, we've mentioned donor practices. I'm a recovering donor. And I see a lot of how funders are making changes overnight that have vast consequences. And this idea of, if one organization says, no, we won't do it, another will pick it up. So there's just something really exciting there that I'd love to continue marinating on. And if any of you are also interested in kind of continuing to think about that, reach out to me. We can have coffee chat virtually or in person if we happen to live close. So I really just thank you so much, because I am going to be thinking about these ideas for the rest of this week and the following. And very, very honored to have had Yasmina and Suchi and Yande here with us today, and Jacqueline, our fabulous moderator with epic background in feminist movements and practices. So thank you for your kind and thoughtful moderation. Obviously, a huge thanks also to the Accountable Now team who made this event possible, Mary and Katie especially. I know you worked very hard to pull this off, and we couldn't have done it without you. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for making time to be with us today, and follow up with any ideas or questions, and you'll hear more post-event from us. So thanks again.